We've had a chat about managing change successfully, and maybe not so successfully, perhaps, as well. Let's go a bit further into that, shall we? Let's get to the nitty-gritty. What kind of mistakes do people make when trying to manage change in a successful way?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question. I have to say that in all the 30 years or so that I've been working in the area of training and development with some of the biggest corporates around the world, I have to say there are many, many more failures to manage change well than there are successes.
Oh dear.
And you only have to ask people to give you examples of where their organization has failed, and you can come up with exactly the same reasons time after time. So let me give you the main reasons that people have shared with me over the years as to why change is managed unsuccessfully. What are the mistakes? Number one, the highest reason, the biggest reason, is that the people implementing the change, initiating the change, plan it and prepare for it behind closed doors. So typically senior manager, maybe the CEO, maybe directors, maybe senior function heads meet secretly, maybe off-site or in a certain part of the building, to think through all of this in private. Now, people aren't stupid, and people know that something is going on. They don't know quite what, but rumors start to spread that there are changes afoot and so on. And it's like they want to do this in isolation because they don't want anybody to know what this is about until they tell them. The difficulty is, and the danger is, that they overlook key elements of the change. Because they don't involve people down through the organization, all the way down to the sharp end of doing business, they overlook key essentials, key parts of the change that they need to attend to. They make assumptions, they overlook things, they don't see gaps in their planning and preparation. Therefore, they put together a plan, working in this isolation, that, to be honest, is bound to fail. A classic is a hotel chain that I was working with that planned a change in terms of their booking system, making it more automated, and failed to think through what the receptionist at the hotel would be required to do to use this booking system in a productive and efficient way. So they were about to bring in a change which simply wasn't going to work right at the ground floor. Of course, they found that out later on in the change management process, and they had to rewind all that they've been doing and take that into account. So number one is planning in isolation. Number two, then they burst on the unsuspecting crowd of employees and say, this is what we're going to do. It's a one-way presentation, very autocratic, very authoritative. We're the people who run and lead this business. We know what we're doing is the impression. People sit there, of course, and think, well, they haven't thought of that. And how's this going to work? And as this great game plan is shared, actually, rather than gain respect of people on a wider scale, they lose respect and trust and credibility because they've been so foolish as to not involve key people, key stakeholders throughout the business. So immediately people are thinking, oh, this isn't going to work. This is ridiculous. But they plow ahead. Because the next thing, I suppose, in terms of failure, they don't ask for feedback, they don't consult, they don't involve people who know better than them, they don't collaborate with wider groups of people to test their ideas and make sure they're going to work, and they're arrogant enough to feel that they can do this and just drive it through, almost through a sense of personal willpower. Totally wrong management and leadership style.
It's bound for failure, really, isn't it?
Bound for failure. You and I can see this, of course, right away. But because now they've launched off in this direction, they can't easily turn back because they've obviously made that announcement and it's highly visible,
Yes.
and their credibility is at stake. The next thing they don't do, of course, then is plan properly. They don't take into account interdependencies between one department and another. They don't think about how you plan a project to deliver this or a program to bring different projects together.
Implications.
and the plan is very shaky, and it's just not thought through, and it's simply not going to deliver. So their planning is appalling. Nevertheless, they're setting out and they're going to do this, and the plan isn't really sufficient. It's not fit for purpose.
Well, they expect it to work itself out.
Oh yes,
somehow.
that's right. Don't worry, we've always managed this in the past. I'm sure it will come good in the future.
It'll work itself out.
Exactly. But then when it is failing, they continue with the failure. So when people say, excuse me, I think we've got a bit of a problem here, I think we need to change direction, they say, oh, absolutely not. No, we've decided this is where we're going, this is what we're going to do. And frankly, this is it. We're going to do that. So they're inflexible. Now, let me tell you this. It's a very, very big truth that whenever you begin to think about change and creating change and implementing it, I will tell you, as soon as you set out, your plan is going to have to change. It's a bit like planning to sail from Southampton to New York, and you've mapped out your course and it's all straight and straightforward, but you haven't taken into account that a third of the way across you're going to be hit by some awful storm, knocked off course, and then what is your plan B or plan C? They don't think about that at all.
No contingency.
No contingency, no flexibility, no adaptability. And then finally, when they fail, of course, what do? They blame others. And it's not their fault. It's obviously a lack of understanding or know-how or ability at different levels in the organisation. And then, of course, that further breeds this culture of blame and fear. And that then increases into the future so that people will say to themselves, well, I'm not going to speak up. I'm not going to put my head above the parapet. If they've decided what they're going to do, and frankly, they're going to do it anyway, why should I put myself at risk? So they suppress the thoughts and the ideas of others in planning things which are only for the benefit of the organisation. And of course, they continue to fail. So there we are. How do I summarise that? Planning in isolation, autocratic, authoritative leadership, lack of flexibility in terms of planning and implementation, lack of communication, collaboration, lack of consultation, and the arrogance at the end of the day, not to accept it was their fault, but to blame others. Failure, written high and loud, and they just don't see it.
Thank you.